this call, guys, who are new, please put new in the chat. We wanted to welcome you all. Hi, Steve, Sherman, yes. Natalie, welcome. Natalie. Hello, Rick. Hi. Welcome, guys. Dawn, hello. We only have one new. Wow.
We got to have some shy ones there.
Yeah. Thank you for always showing up with our webinar, guys. Thank you. And before we proceed, I wanted to take this opportunity to greet our amazing and dedicated marketing manager, Maricar Baluyot. Car,
birthday girl.
Yeah, Car, in behalf of Highland Park, we wanted to thank you for all the hard work that you do to fill our funnels with leads and engagements. You are an inspiration to the whole team, and you and your team is one of the driver for us to push through this webinar to service more lapidaries, to help and share information. So thank you so much for that one, Car. We really appreciate you. Wow. Guys, this is a place where we share our knowledge, ask our questions, and get tips and tricks about the lapidary art. And for sure tonight, this will be another interactive and informative session for us. Our guest speaker is no other than Erika Martenson. She will drop more bullets on the process of silversmithing. I know you all are excited. And for our Q&A, you can raise your hand if you have some questions by going into our reactions icon at the bottom of your Zoom and click raise hand. Or you can also post your questions via chat. Okay, everybody is excited. So let's kick this off with our intro video to our 12 live interactive webinar.
All righty. So let's put us up in the spotlight. Thank you very much, Lizelle. My name is Sherman Rowland. I know a lot of you guys on the phone here, and super happy to be here with you again. Erika, you just keep creating all kinds of great stuff for us. So thank you very much for last week. And let's get in for this week. I know, and also if you had questions that you didn't get to answer last week, put them in the chat. We'll make sure that we get to them. So just ask your questions and we'll go there. So Erika, anything you want to cover before we drop into the first video, which is where you're getting into the sawing and the cleaning of the shank? You want to do like a quick recap for the new people on what we covered in the first two videos, just a high level summary?
Yeah, the first couple videos we covered soldering and soldering strength, actual solder strength, the easy, medium, hard. We covered creating your bezel, putting your bezel down on your back plate. We covered lots of questions, lots of really good questions about flux and pickle and soldering boards and just really good meaty stuff. So if you guys missed it, you should check out the YouTube videos for sure on the Highland Park YouTube channel.
Yep, there's some links right there for part 1 and part 2 of this series. Why don't we go ahead into first on the sawing and the cleaning of the shank. That's the first video as we're kind of getting to the completion of putting it together. And by the way, actually, you want to hold up the piece so people actually know what we're going to? Move it really slow.
So here is the Kalina Verde ring. I hope everybody can see that.
So move it real slow.
A very just simple, clean, and sturdy split shank ring.
Yep. So good. So you can see that's kind of where we're going. It's cool. You just finished up the polishing on that. What, today or this week?
Yeah, last night.
So, when you see that final piece, then you can then start thinking about for these next videos, what's actually going into that. And what our hope is you'll be able to use this video series as a reference. You can go back and say, how did that get done? So you'll be able to get into a whole bunch of data that will help you really in your silversmithing and also of course lapidary, because you also do all the stonework as well, although we didn't cover that in this video.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting too, because we'll spend roughly 4 hours covering how to go from point A to point Z on making a ring. And that's kind of pretty much how long it takes if you do batch work, but it's pretty accurate. It's not a very fast. People say, why is your stuff so expensive? Why is handmade stuff so expensive? Well, because it took me 4 hours to make it, you know? So you got to keep that in mind too. It takes a long time to make stuff by hand.
Well, and we'll talk about that, because that point around, one of the questions people talk about is, well, how do I make good money with my jewelry? How do I make good money with my lapidary? In an upcoming session, we're going to be doing a session with a lapidary Dave. For some of you may or may not know him. One of the things he talks about is the importance of choosing material. And John speaks about this a lot as well. Choose material that's relevant. So if you go and you make a ring and you're going to use something that is very generic, that's probably coming out of Indonesia or India, that's being produced in big chop shops, you're not going to make any money on that. The uniqueness of the stone, the beauty, the creativity, and the artistry is what's going to really make a big impact in terms of your costs. Like it used to be back in the day, like early 80s, and courtside, everybody be doing what John would call like the old fogey shapes, the big high dome ovals and rounds. And that's so gone to Asia or to India. That's not what to make money on anymore. It's more the unique shapes. It's things that require more skill. It's more attention to the feel of the piece. And this is a really important piece as you as an artist, is making sure that you're distinguishing yourself by material choice and workmanship, because you're not going to want to compete with the low end. It used to be in China. Now it's all Jaipur, India. So huge, massive operations, terrible working conditions for the most part. And they're just cranking out, cutting stone without probably even looking at the stone that much. It's rubbish. Yeah. A lot of it's rubbish. But the customer who buys that ring, would be fair to say that customer is not the customer that's going to be looking for the, $10 ring.
Oh, and people cruise down to Mexico and they snatch up a sterling silver turquoise ring and then want it for, $20, $15. that's not what we crank out here. You know, it's different. It's real turquoise to begin with.
Right.
I'm not saying all Mexican jewelry is shady. It's
no,
not.
but I mean,
It's
a
good.
lot of what you see in Mexico is not being done in Mexico. It's coming from Asia as well. I mean, it's a buying, reselling thing. Like if you go to the little gift shops.
Yeah.
But and not necessarily silver either. You know, it's plated. It looks nice for a while, and then man, it's got a weird coloration on my finger. So
nickel, nickel silver.
Exactly. So anyway, with enough on that, let's jump into this first video. Joanna, why don't you cue us up on the sawing and the cleaning the shank?
All right. I really love using this low wire for my ring bands because sometimes I like to stamp something along the bottom of the band, which we might do that. But I like to flatten it so that I have a good stamping surface. Yeah, baby. See, now I got it nice and, well, not too flat. I still like having a nice rounded edge on it. But one time through that rolling mill, and a rolling mill, honestly, is a game changer for smiths because you can do so many different things with a rolling mill. You can make your own patterned wire. You can make crazy shanks like I do. I mean, I love having a rolling mill. I just started farting around with texture plates and stuff like that, which, just like everything, takes practice. All right, time to stamp my signature on here so that 20 years from now, people know that I was the one who made it. So this is my signature stamp. I've had this thing since I started. It's a picture of Mount Hood. And then when I started cutting cabs, I kept the mountain in it. Don't get all blurry on me. And then I always stamp a 925 on there too. Alright, so when a stone is this big, and it has this big of a bezel, I mean, and it's on your finger. I don't wear rings this big, but some women love big rings. When you have a big stone on a shank, and you have a skinny little piece of wire, you're not going to have a whole lot of stability if you just keep this like this. If you just bend this into a round ring shank and solder it on right there. With a big stone like this, I want to have 4 points, wide points, so that it sits nice and sturdy on the finger. Because if you just have a wire, if you just have a single shank like this and whoever's wearing this catches this on a doorknob, good grief, they're going to break their finger. But if you have the ring shank coming up to 2 separate points on each side, it's more secure and most likely more comfortable on the finger than if it was just a skinny little band. Again, being that this is such a wide bezel, long bezel, and it's going on a finger, I want to make this shank a split band shank, so there's 4 touch points to the bottom, so it's more sturdy and more comfortable. Now I have my splits, so I can split them. This one's a little bit short. Time to anneal this baby so it's easier to bend. Bending a ring shank is probably one of the hardest. I want to get that stuff on there so I'm not dealing with fire stain. Well, you always deal with fire stain, but sometimes you can deal with less than you have to. But when you anneal something, you soften it. When you take heat to something, you make it softer, so it's easier to bend. And you really want to get it so it's fiery cherry red. Some people say you're supposed to just let it naturally cool before you throw it in the pickle or your quench water. I don't know. For me, it just depends on how big of a hurry I'm in. You want to get this baby nice and hot so it's almost glowing. Get it nice and hot. You don't want to melt it. There you go. All right, now that you got your annealed ring shank, now it's time to open up the arms of it, or the split part of the shank. This is how I do it. Again, there's 15 million ways to do 15 million things. This is just the way that's always made sense to me. I take my flat nose pliers and I just kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 it. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how I've always done it. All right, now that you've got your shank all split, inside there, I don't know if I can show you, but inside that split shank is just a mess from the saw, and it's all crooked. So this is when I take my silicone wheel, my knife edge silicone wheel. You can use sandpaper in there. You can use like little needle files. I just like using silicone wheels because I love silicone wheels. I need a t-shirt that says I love silicone wheels. Silicone wheels are bust. And normally I have a mask on when I'm doing this, but for this I can't talk and have a freaking mask on, so no mask. You want to protect your lungs. But you just get in there and get it all nice and cleaned out. Because that's a wide split. You don't want it looking dirty and messy in there. Even if you're going to oxidize that part. Oxidization sometimes goes away. And you don't want it to be exposing scratchy, ugly silver. You know what I mean, Jelly Bean?
So
All
one of the
right.
things I want to mention, that when you're watching the last part of that video where she's using the silicone wheel to clean up the split, watch what she's doing with her right hand thumb. She's got her right hand thumb against her other hand, and it really stabilizes the tool. This is one of the things that like Erika will do, and she won't even think about it. And you watch people who are really good with their hands, they'll develop those kind of little tricks about how they stabilize their tool when they're working on a detail like that. So when you rewatch this video, particularly if you're not used to using your Dremel tool like this or your Fordham tool like this, you watch for those kind of techniques because they really help you control your tool.
Yep.
One question I had for you on this. So when you did this, the ring shank, what was your whole process of figuring out the length?
That, I don't know. I think we covered that last week, maybe, but there's a formula. There's a established formula where you take the size and then you calculate the gauge of silver you're using for your wire, and there's a whole,
you know what, I think there's actually, you did talk about that last week, and I think somebody put in the link the chart that we thought that you referenced.
She did.
So,
yeah, she put it up, but most of the time it's just a chart I refer to, gives you the millimeters, and then I just, as you can see when I'm slicing up the shank down the middle of the shank, I eyeball everything. So
right.
Hey, Sherm.
Yep.
Yeah, we have one question from Gina. She's raising
Gina's
her
iPad. Although she just vanished. Put your video on. Like when we bring people up, we want to have your video on. It makes it a lot more interesting for everybody else.
we'll come back with her later.
Okay.
Yep,
yeah.
thank
But
you.
yeah, if you want to ask questions, like make sure you have your video on so we can actually talk to you. There's Gina. She's back. All right. Let's unmute Gina. And you, on that bot, there you are. I think unmute yourself. There you are. Now you can talk. We hear you.
So when you anneal and you talked about naturally cooling, my understanding with annealing metal, once you cool it, then the molecules go back, they harden. So do you still find it more malleable when you do cool it?
you mean when I let it air cool? You can
Well,
still
no, when you
quench. A lot of,
you can still
from my experience, you can anneal your piece and get it cherry red hot, and you can go ahead and throw it in your quench water. It's still going to be annealed. But what I said in that thing, and I said it last week, it's better if you let it air cool for a few minutes before you quench it, because it'll still continue to heat up and cool down naturally.
Okay. I thought maybe once you quenched it, then it wouldn't be malleable anymore. So that's what I wanted to know. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then now there are other materials, like when we do hardening process for some of our stuff, that's when you're heating it. And that's a thing that's hardening, but it depends on the type of alloy that you're working with. John, you know the physics.
Yeah, well, silver is much more forgiving than certain materials. Like if you use oil hardening or air hardening steel, you heat it up, and the technique for actually making it harder is you heat it up cherry red, and then you're quenching it in oil or in water, depending on the material, and it will make it harder. So one of the reasons why people recommend that you don't immediately quench the piece is that it will revert a little bit of the anneal on silver, where if you let it just air cool down, past that.
Oh, sorry, John.
So I mean, it's not going to be as picky as steel. So like Erika says, it's still going to be workable, but also to Erika's point, letting it cool down a little bit before you throw it in quench, you'll get the best results.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Gina, for your
Great question, Gina.
Thank you.
Question.
All right. And then you're talking about a suction system here, but I didn't get the context. But I think you said you want a suction system there, Erica. Is that something that's like venting?
Yeah, that you can get them. They're so nice, and I really do need to invest in one, because at the end of the day, when I'm working in here, the floor is just full of silicone dust and silver dust, and I know some of it's going up my nose, and it's my next purchase. It really is, because you can get them and makeshift them so that you've got a couple different little hoses here and there, and I just need something to filter.
Well, you know, in John's shop down in Texas, and I think we may do that in the Philippines too. We also then have, it's a pretty good size shop. It's a manifold, and everything's venting outside to a big dust collector machine. Isn't that what you have there in Texas?
Yeah, I put a big dust collector in it, and I ran piping around to the different areas of my shop that were more generating more particulate, and that way I could open up gates and have the maximum suction each workplace I'm working. But I just did it with PVC, bought it at Home Depot and plumbed it in and hooked it up to a Harbor Freight dust collector. It worked great.
Right.
But when I get mine, I'm actually thinking about creating because when I'm working on something like that, I've got my Optivisor on. Yep. And I'm working really close to my face because that's where I'm most comfortable. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do something around here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, Eric just mentions here about reversing the Fordham to get dust flowing away from a righty versus your face. So righty on reverse on a Fordham and a dust collector. Yeah, Eric is also a serious caver. He's got like friggin' amazing shots.
That makes sense though. It makes sense that it would be kicking the dust away and not towards me. But I'm so hardwired learned with my techniques that I feel like if I switched it around, it would be a hot mess.
Yeah.
I'll try it though. I'll try it, Eric.
Yeah. Learn bad habits early. Yeah. All right. Why don't we roll to that next video, Joanna?
Like there's Snowball, the albino koi. Anyways, this is one of those ring benders that I spent a ton of money on. You can get the nylon pegs and benders and use it. I hate it. I love my old method of just slapping it on this mandrel and hammering it with my rawhide. I'll show you how. Yep. So I already have it annealed, so it's pretty soft. But I'm making this as a 10, a size 10. So I've got this, my mandrel fits right into my bench block. I got this thing on Seattle Findings. I've had it forever. I just like to kind of get those started. And then I just start whacking. Flip it. They make these really cool, like, I've seen them on Instagram and jewelry videos where you just lay the band in the metal groove and then you take the mandrel and you hit it and it bends it perfectly. The problem with doing it on a mandrel like this is it can sometimes become uneven because of the grade, you know, how the mandrel goes small to big. But that's why you just gotta manipulate it. After I get it mostly bent, I do a lot of hand manipulation. All right, again, okay, so now that I have my shank all bent to the size I need it, which I'm glad I didn't film that part because that's where I ride the struggle bus. But a lot of times people like to use miters to put their ring band inside the miter, and then so that they can file it flat. But on these wide shanks, man, I can't get that in there. So I like using my ring vise and my belt sander. And what I do is I just move it absolutely perfectly straight up and down. And then I stabilize my hand on the belt sander, and I shove this into my gut. And then I just pray to God it's straight. And then I flip it over. I give it a good look. See if I can balance it. Oh yeah, you know it's flat. If you can balance your ring vise on it, you know it's ready. All right, before I go soldering my back plate to my ring shank, I want to try to make sure that I got as much fire stain off the back of this, because once you have this soldered to your ring shank, I mean, you're pretty married to what kind of tools you can use. So you want to try to get this as clean as possible before you get it on your ring shank. So I'm going to check this thing for fire stain. This is a 3M unitized wheel. It's like a fiber wheel with silicone in it. And ooh yeah, little bit of fire stain right there. These things eat the fire stain, man. And then you hold it up to a piece of white paper, and you can, here, I'll show you. Hold on. I'll show you what fire stain looks like. Okay. You see that area? Hold on. Oh, maybe I can balance this. Hold on. See that area right there? Right there, it's got kind of like a pinkish. There's some right up there, right by the B too, right underneath the B. Fire stain is a pain in the keister. All right, now that I've got my fire stain preventer stuff on there, I'm just gonna put a little bit of flux on all these tips and then get that nice and baked on there. And then I'm going to take my little pallions of easy solder. I'm using easy solder. I'm going to put those on my prongs. And then you just heat it until it melts a little bit. Ah, shoot, it went down quite a bit. That's all right. I like sweat soldering my bands. I like getting the solder on the tips first, and then I flip it over and I solder it to my back plate. All right, now I've got the tips of my ring shanker soldered, sweat solder. I got my back plate all coated with fire stain preventer. I got flux on my back plate. Now I just need to protect my band from fire stain. And you don't have to protect your bands from fire stain. You don't have to protect your work from fire stain. I didn't for the longest time. But then you spend hours cleaning up and filing and sanding and filing and sanding. All right, so now I'm just waiting for it to heat up and take its little seat. Waiting for that silver to melt on the bottoms of those band prongs. Come on. Flow, baby, flow. There we go. Come on, bro. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
All right, that is very, very cool. Now, this is a great place where the easy, medium, and hard comes into play. Why don't you just reiterate that? Because I'm thinking in my mind as you're heating that piece up.
Yeah. Yeah, we did touch on that, I think, on the first one, but I use easy solder when I'm soldering my ring shank to my back plate, because at that point, let's just strike that and reverse it. When I'm making my bezel, I use hard, because when I solder my bezel down onto my back plate, I don't want to have to get it as hot as I did, and I use medium on that part. So I don't have to get it all the way to the hard stage, because I don't want to mess up my seam on my bezel. And if you're trying to use the same strength of solder on everything, then you risk melting what you just soldered. So then by the time I get to my ring shank, I'm using easy. And then they even make extra easy. And I even think they make extra easy. So depending on how much stuff you have to do to your piece, if you use the same strength of solder every single time, maybe you can get away with it. I don't know, but I've never had luck with it.
Right. So, I mean, basically, as you're able to work with those different temperature melting points of the material, then your harder stuff is not going to melt when you're melting at the lower temperature. And so hence, your piece isn't going to come apart. So the more complex, those layers of melting points are really what you're working to. I think it's a real important point, because I think, like you said, when you started, you just used easy because you thought, oh, it's easy.
Yep.
But it's a low melting point.
When I would go to finish my pieces, I'd be looking at my bezel, and it's like a big old gap on the top of my bezel. And why is that happening? Well, because you're baking your solder at the same temperature.
Right, right.
So I'm curious, how many people are new to torch work that are on the chat right now? Put new in the chat if you haven't done torch work before. All right, so we got a fair number of news. So one of the things to watch in these videos is when you watch Erika as she's putting the ring shank on the bezel, that she's always got that torch moving. She's never stopping, holding it in one place. This is going to be the most critical habit for you to learn as you develop your torch work, because when you stop, all the heat goes into one place, and that's when you start melting stuff and having damage occur.
Yep, it's very important to heat the whole piece. Now, that's not to say that when you're attaching a jump ring to a end of a chain, or you're trying to do a very small tight solder, when you do graduate to a little Smith's torch, you can use little teeny tiny tips, and you don't have to heat the whole piece because it gets blazing hot right where you need it. But when you're making the structure and the very beginning pieces, you do have to heat it evenly, because you'll struggle soldering, because it's always going to be cooling down, and it's metal, it's all connected. So you have to keep it hot so it melts evenly.
Right. And I noticed that you were saying on the earlier thing, like you want the solder is going to follow the heat. So if you want it to flow in a particular way, as you move that heat, once it starts flowing, it's going to follow that heat so that you can get a really stable, fully soldered seam.
Right. Solder follows flame.
Right. Right. A lot of people new to torch work. So like what we're rolling out in these last few videos with Erika is gold. Like this is going to take so much frustration from learning. I mean, just the whole thing around easy don't mean easy. It just means it's a melting point. And if you think about these melting points, then you want a variety of melting points. So as you assemble, you're not baking and taking apart what you put together when you add another piece to your as you silversmith. And that's not a commonly known thing. Probably for people who are really in it, they know it.
But even with us talking about it, it's a hard concept to grasp when you're brand new because your brain's not even thinking that far ahead. When you are ready to use your torch and learn flux and learn solder, that's when you will learn, most likely from hard mistakes, that using the different strengths is important. But when you're first starting, it's not really something you think of. So that's why I'm here to help you not make those mistakes.
And it's really, like you said earlier, it's not necessarily the strength of the solder, it's the melting point of the solder. Because you're using easy on here. It's going to be as strong as hard. It's just a lower melting point. So you can put less temperature in to bond that without untaking apart your basil.
They refer to it as strengths when you buy it. But you're right.
They probably don't know. I mean, the manufacturer may not know. They're like, oh, it's strong.
All right.
Yeah. No, that's really, really, really good. Eric has a point, like make drain drops from bits of wire and learn what the melting points look like. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So why don't we roll to the next video?
All right, now I just took it out of the pickle. Oh boy, it's got so much cleanup to do, but we made the bezel, the back plate, we stamped the back plate, we made the shank, the ring shank, and we soldered it to the back plate. Again, there's a million different ways to do a million different things. Sometimes when I post these videos on my Instagram, people will comment and they'll say, oh, I don't do it that way. I do it a different way. And it's like, awesome. If you find the way to do things that works for you and you like the results of how it comes out, then you're golden. You don't need to do it any other way. You will always find your own way of doing things. I didn't take any silversmithing classes ever. So sometimes some of the things I do, probably there's a totally easier way to do it. But with how my brain works and what I think makes sense, that's just how I do it in my way. All right, peace. All right, this baby's gonna need a lot of cleanup. Lots of scratches, probably full of fire stain. We gotta get the inside of that ring shank done. We gotta get the outside of the bezel all gussied up. Until then, be bold.
You want to roll to the next one because this kind of ties right in, or anything you want to say about this, because this is like getting into cleaning up. Because I look at that now, and this is for a new person. You might look at that and you're like, that don't look bad. So what are you looking at?
But I think I covered in a video ahead of this, but not everybody is shooting for a super shiny finish. This is just what I do to get my pieces super polished. You have to, you have a lot of cleanup to do when you're trying to, but if you're just going to oxidize it and throw it in some rosy revolver and you want it real gunmetal-y rustic, you don't have to do half of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's roll to the next video.
Okay, now that we have everything soldered and it's already out of the pickle and It's time to clean it up and make it nice and shiny and finished. This had to be definitely the most confusing part for me when I first started. I used a lot of sandpaper, just regular sandpaper. I used those crazy 3M clothy sanders, you know, that come in all the different grits. And I did everything by hand with, you know, pro polish pads, and the thought of using a burr or a sanding bit was just way too out of my league. So I did everything by hand. And then I started using a Dremel, just a regular handheld Dremel, and only really used that sanding bit that I showed you the other day with the sandpaper on it, and a polishing thing that Dremel sells that I bought, some rando rouge from Rio. Didn't know anything about rouge, polishing rouge, and I used that. Those were the only two things. And then I started seeing that other smiths had really shiny polished finishes, and I thought, gosh, how do they do it? And then I figured, well, I gotta get the whole surface the same, down to the same level, and I have to get rid of all the seams and stuff. So that's when I discovered silicone wheels. And silicone wheels are the best invention for silversmiths, if you ask my honest opinion. So now that we have everything like pickled, and now is when I use, after I'm done with all my soldering and I'm ready to tackle the finishing. You know, you can see here all the rough. It's all rough, and you can still see the seam of where the back plate was soldered to the bezel, and like where the ring band is attached, and there's like extra solder right there. This is cleanup time. So let's clean this baby up. So anyone who follows me on my Instagram account, and when I'm doing my tutorials on my story, they know that I've been plugging these things. I use the polisher knife edge. I think these are the fine. And I use them in the cylinders, and I use them in the flat frisbee knife edge discs. And then I use all of the sanding bits, all the different grits. I use brass brushes, and I use just regular old fiber wheels, but those are pretty much the only bits I use. So to show you fire stain, and how when I first started, I didn't even know what fire stain was. This is one of the first few pendants I ever made. Look at that beautiful Royston ribbon. And this crap right here was from a price tag, and it's just sticky stuff I haven't taken the time to get off. But just to show you, see right here, see that pinkish stain? That's fire stain. And I was none the wiser back when I first started smithing. And as far as I knew, it was like just a blemish in the metal, and I was gonna sell it anyway. But now that I've been doing it a while, I wanna get rid of that fire stain, because when your piece is all finished and polished and you leave fire stain on it, it's just a sad day. So my friend Allie Perry, she's a master smith. She's one of my friends on Instagram. I learned more from that girl. These 3M unitized wheels are the best at getting fire stain off. They are the best. So I'm gonna take this unitized wheel, and another good thing that this unitized wheel does is it helps make your surface all even. It can eat solder, it can eat extra solder, but I kind of do that with my silicone wheels. I think I've pretty much got it, to be honest with you. I think I've got it all. Yeah, I've got most of it. But anyways, we're not working on this piece. That was just to show you how to get rid of fire stain.
We good?
Yeah, yeah. So, so when you work that fire stain piece out there, so I assume there you're taking the fire stain off using that unitized wheel, and then you're going to start through a whole polishing process.
Yeah, and the unitized wheel is a beautiful thing. You can still get fire stain off with sandpaper. You can get it off just sanding the high heavens out of it with the rougher grit of the bristle, which we're going to get into, you know, the bristly ones. It's a fiber wheel that's impregnated with silicone, and it's kind of rough. So it really just eats it.
Right. I think we've used those tools, a similar tool like that in the factory in China, John. It's like probably similar to those other wheels.
To polish the stainless.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's how you're doing. That's also when you're doing the patterning on that, right? The brushed thing on the stainless is that same kind of tool. Yeah. Let's roll to the next wheel. I mean that we're.
Let's see where we are.
Where we at on time?
It's 7:53. How many videos did we get through? The videos we needed to get through today, Joanna?
Yes, that's a yes.
Okay, so let's see whether we have any more questions, because I think we still have another week to go with the rest of the finishing, right, Erika?
Yeah, we haven't really done, like, I know that there was, right after this is when I get into silicone wheeling and sanding. I thought we would get to that tonight, but
yeah. How long is that next video, Joanna?
I say we play it. Let's just play it.
I think we do it. Do that video.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do one more.
And we'll come back to Cornelia. We'll come back to your question there.
Fix them. But I will go over every single part of my ring where I can fit this thing. And I try to not hit the upper part of the bezel because this thing eats silver. So I just try to focus it where I absolutely and I'll even use it on the back side too, where I can fit it. And try to get off as much fire stain as I can. I do the band. I already hit this thing pretty good before I started this video. But then once you get in the middle, once you've already got your ring shank soldered onto your back plate and you've got fire stain in here and you have no way of getting it out, well, welcome to the struggle bus. All right, now that I have done as much damage as I can do with my unitized wheel, this is when I like to bring out my silicone wheel, my knife edge, to get into those areas that are, you know, hard to reach with that big old wheel. Now, silicone wheels, you think, you know, silicone, you hold that on your finger long enough, it's gonna burn you. And that's why my fingers look like hamburger. But this is when I like to get underneath there. And you don't want to hold it straight up and down perpendicular to the metal because it will create a divot pretty darn quick. So you want to get up in there and kind of use it as use the leverage on it because it's flexy. Get up in there and get that extra solder off. And But you got to keep it moving, because if you stay in one spot for too long, you're going to create more damage. These things can eat silver pretty fast. And then I also like to get under here. If there's any extra solder under there, this is when I get it out. I just love silicone wheels. They just make your work so much cleaner. One day it's my goal to not have to do as much cleanup, but all right. And the cylinder ones are also really good for going around the edge of where your bezel meets your back plate, and it just kind of makes it nice and sharp and clean. That's when the cylinder one is good too, because you got to use a little bit of elbow grease and wrist pressure. Maybe even a stronger silicone wheel, but I like using the fine because, again, you can really do some damage really quickly with a silicone wheel if you're not careful. These edges can get kind of sharp, and when you're wearing a ring and it's sharp, I mean, that's not comfortable. So this is a welding. You can get it in the, I think you can get it in the plumber's section. It's it's what they use on copper pipes and stuff. So I take it and I just run it along that edge real gently to try to make it not so drastically sharp, so it's more comfy on the finger. But you want to be really careful when you get down towards your back plate, because how many times have I slipped and edge not as sharp? Because if a ring is not comfortable, it'll always be the last one to be chosen. I like making my jewelry comfortable. Just kind of makes it a little less sharp. But after you use that tool, you know, it's still going to be shiny and a little, you know, harsh. So you take your silicone wheel and it'll even that out nice and smooth. Get all those little divots and bumps out that you created. The thing with finishing, the finishing part of making something, like, you know, all the cleanup, you can ultimately create way more work than you have to if you use too many things, you know. You can do a lot of damage during the cleanup portion, even though you think you're like helping it. Sometimes you're just creating more work for yourself, but that's all part of learning.
All right. So deburring tool, we're super familiar with deburring tools.
Yeah, and it's $5 at Home Depot.
Yep. Yep. And then using those little, I can see why you really like those silicone wheels, because you can just flex them right in. But I think the point that you said is, like, we use a similar wheel for some of the metal finishing we do in the factory, and you leave it set or you come in too straight, you're gonna do a divot right into it versus working it to flex it, you know, so you're getting it as a smoothing function rather than a cutting or carving function.
And that's why they make a lot of these bits. You know, I mean, obviously the sanding, the radial sanders that I'm going to be using next week, but the ones that can do the most damage, they make them in different shapes and points and sizes to accommodate the right tool for the right job. It's just a matter of figuring that out.
So I'm sure people are wondering this question, like, what's the difference? Like, if you're doing all hand sanding and polishing, and you talked about that using the different, you know, sheets, what is the time difference for a ring like this if you did all this work by hand versus using the Fordham and those, you know, more, you know, power tools, if you will?
It's significant. You know, it's significant. If you have all the time in the world when you're first starting out and you're just doing everything by hand, I did it by hand for years. More power to you. You get really strong forearms and really hamburger fingers. But the longer you keep doing it by hand, it becomes taxing and frustrating because you yeah, it's one of those things. I'm not saying everyone has to run out and get a Fordham or a Dremel, but if you start out and try to work yourself right at the beginning to using one, you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and a lot of time looking back thinking, man, why did I wait so damn long to get a rotary tool?
Right.
And they're not expensive.
And then, so in
they're-
terms of selection, I don't know if you're going to be doing this in future videos, but there's so many different selection of tools. You know, did you narrow in? Because some people might say, okay, I want to get the tool. What are like the most essential? And you're kind of talking a little bit, but those essential shapes to get. So you had the little barrel, you had the little disc in terms of the silicone tools. Like, that's going to be, I suspect, a question people will have is like, okay, what is my essential set? And then what are like the nice to haves? Because I suspect that depending on the type of piece you're using, you're going to use a variety of different tooling, but there may be some that are going to be good. Yeah. Cole's like, so overwhelming. Like, what do I choose?
For real. It's one of the most overwhelming parts of starting silversmithing, because if you flip open that catalog, it's like, I don't know what that's for. I don't know what that's for. That looks crazy. That thing's $8,000. Why do I need that? You know, so, but the bits and the sanding bits and all that stuff, it's easy to figure that out. Once you figure it out, you know, it's scary at first, but you can do it.
You know, one of the things,
you know, for next week, why don't we do just a little short video showing what you think are the essential tools for somebody starting?
I will. Okay.
Down to some detail on the silicon wheels and the grit that you're using, like just to make it really easy for everybody when they're picking to start something that is like, I'm not going to waste money and I'm not going to try and figure it all out myself. I'm just going to be, all right, here's a basic set that I can be successful with.
We'll do that. I will.
Yeah, no, that's great. So how's everybody liking this? Put in the chat, like, you know, if you're loving this, say yes in the chat. Love it. Loving it. Good. Yep. Bill, Nicole. Yeah, we really aim to help you be successful. Like, that's why we do this, is really to help you have success in your work. You know, we really appreciate you, Erika. Can we put up the Erika's page that has the links, and put her link up in here on there's all, I don't know what these are. These Erika's YouTubes? I don't know what that is, guys.
Yeah.
So here's Erika's stuff. So you can take your camera, you can scan that, follow her on Instagram, on TikTok, the website there. I know you had a sale last weekend, didn't you? You had something going on last week. I know somebody asked the question in the chat, like, how do you sell your stuff? So
somebody can chase her and try and buy that ring from her now.
It's true. It's not sold yet, right? Yeah. So come back to the main screen. So, you know, part of the thing that really helps us is give us a good review. Go to our YouTube If you're not subscribed, subscribe to the YouTube. Drop a comment in the YouTube. If you're liking this, give us a comment. And likewise, give us a Google review. Like we really are aiming to help you. The way you can help us is give us a 5-star review saying, I love these guys. They're doing great stuff. We appreciate that. Makes a difference. That also makes a difference because with YouTube, the reviews affect how many people find you. We really are very committed to giving you maximum value so you can succeed. And then our hope is when you need a piece of equipment down the road, be like, I'm going to call those Highland Park people. Talk to Lizelle's team. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and tell people about this. All these videos going up. One of the things that John and I really saw in Lapidary is there's in the past there you'd have the kind of sometimes you'd have the old timer that was really good at a certain particular skill, but they wouldn't want to share because they're like, well, you'll compete against me. And that's small thinking. And so
you stop and think about it. Back in what was it, 2010 or 2011, Rock and Gem magazine had 25,000 subscribers. Now, if you think about this, magazine's been around for like 50 years and they got 25,000 out of 300 million people in America. Are they getting the job done? They're not getting the job done. And I suspect their subscribership has gone down. And the reason being is the world has changed. And now all of the rock clubs are on the web. Like everybody thinks go to the local rock club, but the reality is most people don't live close to a local rock club. The local rock clubs aren't that active. But if you get on Facebook, it's a rock club meeting in multiple groups 24/7. And there are thousands of people in these groups and they're sharing information. But the challenge is the information is not organized. So you can't find it, or you want to get an answer and you got maybe 100 responses and 2 of them are actually right. And the rest of them are guys sitting in an armchair that are guessing or making up stuff, or they've got like really bad ideas. And so what we're working to do is actually get people who are experts in creating the lapidary arts and silversmithing arts and bring this content to you so you guys can be learning from people who know what they're doing and sharing that information. And that means we have to be good at promoting what we do so people can find us. This is why we ask for you to subscribe, ask for you to review, because that's what makes us come up in the searches, all the algorithms that are out there on the different platforms. If you have more of that, more people see you. There's 300 million people out there who could be interested, just in the US, who could be interested in what we do. Every kid loves rocks. So we know there's more than 25,000. We know there's more than 1 million. Mm-hmm. And there's not even close to 1 million in it. So that's why we're working on this and focusing here. This is the new rock group.
Right.
This is the reality of it.
Community over competition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and one of our mentors says, collaboration is the new currency. We're always looking at places to collaborate together, not compete. Like I'm not worried about, we're talking about Rio or other things. We want to point you to the right tools. I mean, we are good at our particular tools, but we really want you to be successful. That's really the whole point of why we do this. And we're doing it for free, but we do it because it helps build the community. Just what Erika said. All right. So anything else we want to wrap up with there, Miss Lizelle?
I think we're all set for today. And
Folks,
yeah,
go ahead. So folks, super happy for you guys to be here. We will be here same time Thursday night. And we're going to try to get the messages out because I guarantee you some people are going to show up Friday and they'll be like, oh, where's the webinar? And we'll get phone calls. So it's Thursday next week. We moved it because you guys through the survey said we want Thursdays. Frankly, we kind of like the Thursday a little bit better too. So from here on out, we will be on Thursdays. So thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next week for the part 4 on silversmithing with Erika.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
All right,
Erika.
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
And make your Google review. Thanks.